is finished, with Elon Musk now declaring the people of Britain want change. That was after a staggering new poll put Labour in fourth place, with its support now astonishingly lagging behind the Green Party. Mad people, led by Mr. Tit Whisperer himself, Zack, who truly wants to give our country away for good, as his new video about what it means to be British proves.
I went to Handsworth in Birmingham the other day. It was absolutely appalling. It's as close as I've come to a slum in this country.
Add lots of Norman French to some Angles, Saxon, Jutes and Vikings, then stir vigorously. Mix some hot Chileans, cool Jamaicans, Dominicans, Trinidadians and Bajans, with some Ethiopians, Chinese, Vietnamese and Sudanese. Then take a blend of Somalians, Sri Lankans, Nigerians and Pakistanis and turn up the heat. Sprinkle some fresh Indians, Malaysians, Bosnians, Iraqis and Bangladeshis, together with some Palestinians, then add to the melting pot. Leave the ingredients to simmer. As they mix and blend, allow their languages to flourish, binding them together with English. Allow time to be cool. Add some unity, understanding and respect for the future, serve with justice and enjoy.
To respond now, acclaimed historian and broadcaster Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, fellow of the New Culture Forum. Rafe, wow, I mean, this was inevitable, wasn't it? This was an inevitable result of what has been going on, the sectarianism, which is now part of British life.
You have to ask, what's happening to our country, when we are kowtowing and placating the enemies both within and without, right? Because just think what's happened this month. Externally, we've had the Labour government take the knee to China, allowing a spying case to collapse because they refused to identify China as an enemy and a national security threat. And then internally now, we have the same thing happening with our domestic threat, which is radical Islam. And once again, the government and councils are taking the knee. I mean, this is completely weak, completely cowardly. It's, Britain used to be a country that stood up for what was right. We wouldn't be cowed by terrorists. We always stood up and protected the vulnerable. This is a completely disgraceful betrayal, not only of the Jewish community in this country, but indeed of everything that our forebears fought and died for. It's completely indefensible. We've even had on the BBC Radio 4 this morning, the CEO of this Israeli football team, Maccabi, and he said they were able to actually have a game in Turkey, where the police in Turkey were able to perfectly protect the Israeli fans and the Israeli team. So that's the sort of state we've got to now in this country, where in the Muslim majority nations, Jews feel safer than they do in this country. We also know that we've had a leading figure, a leading member of the government of the United Arab Emirates, saying that Britain has a serious issue with radical Islam and terrorism. This is what happens when you are afraid to call out the virulence of the anti-Semitism, the bigotry, the homophobia, the misogyny of cultures that are completely incompatible with our way of life in the terms of radical Islam. And of course, we now have two-tier policing clearly in evidence here. What we have now is a system whereby the police don't judge things any longer in terms of the appropriateness of an event taking place. It's about which size group can bring out the biggest mobs into the street. We have the police here, along with the council, along with all the authorities who made this decision in Birmingham not to allow this. They are essentially too afraid of what might happen if they allow these things to go on. They're trying to essentially keep things simmering rather than allowing them to boil over.
Indeed, they are. Matt Goodwin made a good point on his Substack today, I thought, Rafe. He wrote, I wonder when will the Times, the newsagents, or New Statesman send Fraser Nelson, Emily Maitlis and Andrew Marr to spend 1 month in Birmingham and offer us the typically insightful conclusion, yes, diversity is working. Because quite clearly it's not, Rafe. But you look at that post from Lewis Goodall, you know, he was obviously responding to the comments from Robert Jenrick, which were branded racist. And as Maya Tusi said, Lewis posted this 10 days ago. Today, his Islamic city of Birmingham banned Jews from watching football. But they're tone deaf to this, aren't they, Rafe? I mean, could you believe that video from Zack Polanski, which today of all days, is being celebrated by the elite class, being retweeted infinitum by all of the people who seem to want to ignore what's actually happening to our country, Rafe?
Absolutely. You have to ask, are they dim? Are they disingenuous? Or are they deluded? Or are they all three? You know, they live in these rarefied, gilded cages, far removed from the dark side of diversity. They're not living at the coalface of the segregated communities that have blighted and completely changed so many towns and cities. For them, mass immigration has meant that they've got cheap gardeners, they have cheap cleaners, and they have essentially a nanny to look after their children. That to them is multiculturalism. Whereas, of course, for the vast mass of this country, people who are from the working class communities who have to deal with these troubles on a daily basis, they see what's happening. You know, there's a reason that rape has quadrupled over the last 10 years when we've seen unprecedented immigration and including the Boris wave. We have the data. We know the top 10 countries from which we get the most violent crime, the most sexual assaults, robberies and so forth. And they are some of the same countries that Zack Polanski, the great hypnotist in chief, has listed in his recipe. You know, I think
and he should be a joke, Rafe, but he's beating Labour in the polls. 15.3% of the polls, I think in part because he's getting this complete clear run from the mainstream media. Look, you talk about the Boris wave. I just have to show you this graph, which is based on Bank of England and Office for National Statistics figures, because it still makes me angry when I see this, Rafe. It still makes me angry. You know, look at our net migration into the United Kingdom up until Tony Blair became Prime Minister. But then look at what happened with the Boris wave. And it's devastating to me. This is irreversible, potentially.
Let's be clear. Mass immigration has been the greatest act of harm in our entire history, far more damaging and consequential than the cost of fighting the Second World War, far more important an issue than Brexit and leaving the European Union. Yet the British people were given a referendum on leaving the EU, but we were never consulted about this unparalleled demographic change that we've experienced.
No, but every time we have been consulted, Rafe, we've said no. I mean, every single time. I mean, right, dating back to Enoch Bowell, for God's sake, every single time we've said no and we've been ignored.
We've had more immigration in the last 25 years than in the last 2,000 years combined. We had more immigration in 2024 than we had in the entire decade of the 1980s and 1990s. Let's put that into, and the type of immigration we're getting now, of course, we're getting people who are coming from countries that are completely culturally incompatible. And you look, Eritrea, Somalia, Syria, Afghanistan, these are the countries whose people coming over here rank highest by factors of multiples of 10 in terms of the propensity to commit certain types of crime. We know, for example, 72% of Somalis in this country are in social housing compared to only 16% of the wider population. That's a rate of 4 times more. You know, we're told that we needed mass immigration to bring over all the scientists and the engineers and the doctors. Well, of the last 3 million visas granted, 0.8% were doctors and 0.6% were scientists and engineers. The reality is that only 1 in 20 migrants to this country is a high-earning contributor to the British economy. And for every pound they put into the economy, a low-skilled immigrant takes out £1.60. The majority of migrants that we've attracted, this is not against migration. If we can bring the creme de la creme to this country to enrich this nation, that's fine. But the type of low-skilled, low-earning mass migration we've had has been a disaster. So the average low-earning migrant who's come to this country is a net drain on the economy from the moment they arrive here. If they get to retirement age, they will have cost, each one will have cost £161,000. If they live to the age of 80, each one will have cost us £464,000. £100,000. This is completely unmanageable. It's been a disaster. There was only ever one justification for mass immigration, and that was the economic argument. The economic argument, we were told, that was worth all the cultural change, that was worth all the importation of abhorrent cultural practices, acid attacks, honor killings, child marriage, cousin marriage, forced marriage. All that was to be tolerated because of the economic benefits. Well, the economic argument has been blown out of the water, and even the OBR, the government's watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, acknowledged that. All those stats I gave you come from the OBR.
Extraordinary, and deeply chilling, actually. Breaking right now, the deep state cover-up over the death behind bars of Britain's political prisoner Peter Lynch continues. I am absolutely furious about this. New details emerging about very obvious victimization of this brilliant father of four who was completely unfairly jailed after the so-called riots following the Southport massacre, when he was not involved in any violence whatsoever. And as you know, I have been speaking about Peter Lynch for the past year. I'm still so angry and so upset about what happened to him. So let me just take you through the new details that have emerged first. So here's the headline. Father of four rioter, the Mail called him, 61, killed himself in jail hours after being handed papers for unjust breach of prison rules. An inquest has heard. I just want to remind the Daily Mail that the issue is Peter Lynch was not a rioter. He was a protester. He was a long-term protester. And even the body cam footage released by the police proved that. Watch.
Scum! Praying for our children. I pray for my children. I pray for my children. I pray for the shield. I pray for my children.
Okay, so let me just be very clear, because this matters. Okay, and this is why I'm so angry about this case. Peter Lynch did call the police scum, but he was not violent towards them in any way. He did approach the police, but you can see that the police were actually violent towards him. And that matters, because he should never have been locked up. So here's the report as a result of the inquest. A father of four rioter killed himself in jail just hours after being handed papers for an unjust breach of prison rules. Peter Lynch was jailed for 2 years and 8 months in August 2024 by a judge who heard how he was at the front of a mob outside at a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham. He died at HMP Magdalen, South Yorkshire 2 months later, and an inquest last year heard his death was a result of hanging. But at a pre-inquest review on Thursday, and remember we haven't heard about this at all until now, it was revealed that Lynch had been placed on a charge for a breach of prison rules on the evening of October the 18th, 2024, the night before his death. No details of the allegation he faced were given, but Doncaster's senior coroner Nicola Mundy noted the rioter, that's the Mail's words by the way, had felt it was unjust. No details of the allegation he faced were given, and the coroner also said Lynch disagreed with the account of his actions given by officers in adjudication papers. Ms. Mundy said that she would give her ruling on the inquest scope next week, but indicated she wanted the jury to consider Lynch's mental health and assessments from the point he was arrested and entered police custody. The father of four, of course, part of a crowd that gathered outside the Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham on August the 4th, 2024. Body cam footage was shown to the court of him shouting, "You are protecting people who are killing our kids and raping them," and scum at police with riot shields. I mean, what's untrue? Scum, okay, that's an opinion. But saying you're protecting people who are killing our kids, that's a fact. He was filmed repeatedly challenging officers as they tried to push him back with shields, screaming, "Protect my kids," and yelling, "We are on the streets now to protect our kids." Lynch was also pictured holding a placard asserting the corruption of MPs, judges, the media and police. How is he wrong? How was he wrong? At the sentencing hearing on August the 22nd, 2024, Judge Jeremy Richardson Casey heard how Lynch suffered from diabetes, thyroid issues and angina and had recently had a heart attack. But the judge still locked him up and told him you did not yourself attack any police officer as far as can be detected. But what you did was encourage by your conduct others to behave violently, and you were part of this mob. The Crown Court heard how Lynch had been married for 36 years and had 4 adult children and 3 grandchildren. During the sentencing, Lynch, who was called a family man, pleaded guilty to violent disorder, and he shouted racist and provocative remarks towards police and called asylum seekers child killers. He was working in the packing industry but was recently made unemployed. It's a heartbreaking story, genuinely. And it has broken my heart, actually, for a number of months. And I do not trust what we are being told here. Because why are we only learning now that there was apparently this new charge against him based on his behaviour in prison the day before his death? And I just want to remind everyone what Martin Brunt, the crime editor of Sly News, had reported about what was going to be handed to the so-called rioters in prison.
And if they do end up in prison, somebody who knows about these things told me that, any right-wing, far-right protester landing up in jail, they can expect a pretty cold reception from what he says are Asian gangs inside prison who will be looking out for them.
So forgive me if I don't trust the official narrative. By the way, I just want to show you what type of guy Peter Lynch was, because he had been protesting for years. This is the thing. He didn't go out in anger after the Southport massacre. He had been a long-term protester talking about the corruption of the system during Brexit and during the COVID years. Watch.
Just because you lose, just because you lose, you're a joke. Just because you lose, out. Out means out. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you?
I suggest you move take
out means out. Democratic right.
What do you think?
Traitors to the country. Traitors to the country. Out means out. Out means out. Out means out.
Historian and broadcaster and New Culture Forum fellow Rafe Heydel-Mankoo with me. Rafe, look, he was someone who was deeply concerned about the deep state in the United Kingdom, but his prison sentence, given what he did, given that the judge even admitted that there was no violence against officers, I think it was utterly barbaric. And why are we only learning now? The fact that there was this new charge against him for behaviour in prison, which he disputed the day before he is said to have hanged himself.
Yeah, and that's a key point. He disputed this, and we haven't been given any detail about what he is alleged to have done. But let's just remember here, this is a man who isn't by any stretch of the imagination some far-right racist thug. This is not a violent man. This is a serial protester who's generally concerned about the government of this country. Now, you can agree with him or not, you can regard him as a conspiracy theorist or not, but you can't deny that this is somebody who time and again has demonstrated that he uses his right, freedom of expression, to protest. And instead of that, he was branded as a far-right rioter. Even today, the title in newspaper headlines calls him a rioter. In fact, he's Britain's 21st century political prisoner. That's who he is. But yes. Imagine being a person of his condition, an elderly man with serious physical ailments, suffered a heart attack recently, knowing that he's been slurred and slandered as far right, then to be put into a prison scenario where he'd be looking over his shoulder every moment as these radical Muslim gangs dominate some of those prisons. Remember, this is where many Muslims get radicalized. Over 50% of the Muslim prison chaplains are radical Deobandis, the same cult that gave birth to the Taliban. And is it any surprise, therefore, that he would be perhaps stressed out and playing up in prison, worrying about that sort of future? And let's just remember, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for holding up a sign and shouting in anger. And he wasn't motivated by racism. He wasn't not giving Nazi salutes. He wasn't like a rabid anti-Semite or anything like that. This was an anger fueled because of the slaughter of young girls in Southport. This was a father and a grandfather concerned about that. And if he had gone before a jury, I don't think he would have been convicted. Who knows? But I don't think he would have gone to prison. This was because so many of these people who were protesting were told that they should plead guilty to all of this. But let's just remember here, there was a man who tried to stab somebody in Knightsbridge because he was burning a Quran. This man literally had a knife, was trying to murder a man who was burning the Quran. He escaped a prison sentence. We had a woman, Victoria Bowen, I think her name was, who threw a milkshake onto Nigel Farage. She escaped prison. And here we have a peaceful man with a loud voice. I perhaps wouldn't have called the police scum, but for that, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison.
And of course,
disgrace.
Ricky Jones as well. Ricky Jones, who actually suggested the throat should be slit of his political opponents. He escaped jail too. And by the way, Lucy Connolly, in her interview with me, made it very clear, and she was very concerned about what happened to Peter Lynch, but made it clear that she didn't believe that Ricky Jones should go to prison either. But I think the key point, Rafe, that you have made, and you're absolutely right to point it out, he should never have pleaded guilty. Of course, he should never have pleaded guilty. But the problem is these people, Rafe, are being put under intolerable pressure and being told, and because remember, they were remanded. You know, they were remanded even though they were clearly no threat. I mean, we see Jihad al-Shami, you know, the terrorist who went and killed the people at the Manchester synagogue, who had been reported to the police for extremism and was out on bail for rape. You know, he's on the streets. But of course, Lucy Connolly and Peter Lynch, they were remanded. And there was intolerable pressure put on them because Starmer had made it very clear he wanted quick sentences. He wanted harsh justice. And they misled these people, didn't they, Rafe? Because they tried to make out, look, if you just plead guilty, we're going to remand you now, you'll get a much lighter prison sentence. No way. I mean, they had the book thrown at them.
Absolutely. And I would have hoped and I would have thought that the death of Peter Lynch would have led calls for an inquiry as to how was it that somebody who clearly wasn't a rioter, who clearly wasn't violent, was put in that situation. Indeed, how is it that Lucy Connolly found herself in that situation because they were forced to plead guilty? These are people who were stressed, who were pressured, who aren't masters of the law, and they even had, you know, defense lawyers telling them they should. It's utterly disgraceful. But in the first part of your segment today, when you spoke about the reasons that the Israeli football team fans were being banned from coming over, you quoted and you showed an excerpt from that video by that vile Muslim cleric who said essentially that we will show no mercy to Maccabi Tel Aviv fans for traveling to Birmingham. And that was one of the statements that caused the police to decide not to allow the fans to come over. No talk about the police visiting this man absolutely spewing vile hate, I would say an incitement to hatred, clearly, just on the same level or more than the unfortunate tweet of Lucy Connolly. Nothing done about that at all. This is genuine two-tier policing and two-tier justice in evidence.
No, it really is. It really is. And I mean, we saw it with the Oxford student, didn't we, Sam Williams, who's actually nominated to be our worst Briton in the world this week. Initially, the police weren't going to do anything, right? They were just going to ignore it. He's chanting, you know, put the Zionists in the ground. Then there's the pressure that comes from people on our side of the fence, Rafe, saying, well, hang on a moment, you know, if Lucy Connolly is jailed. I worry about all of this, though, because I think fundamentally I want speech to be free. Let's use daylight as the best disinfectant to sort of expose these people. But I do understand the other argument, which is that you're locking up Lucy Connolly, you're locking up Peter Lynch. How on earth can you not lock up these left-wing people? I did find it quite funny, by the way, to end on a lighter note. Bob Villan, you know, that awful bloke sort of moaning about the fact he's been cancelled. It's like, well, you F around and you find out. F around and find out, Bob Villan. And all of that's happening is exactly what should happen. The market is realizing, okay, maybe you won't go to jail for your hate speech, but we don't want to be associated with you. Breaking today, Laurence Fox in a major court victory over the hard left extremists, including the former Coronation Street and Talk TV star Nicola Thorpe, who accused him of being a racist. Now, this has been a messy and long-running court battle. I mean, Laurence himself admits that this has taken up 5 years of his life. But effectively, the first judgment was insane because it found in favour of the leftists for Laurence responding to their racist claim with his paedophile claim. And it said basically, Laurence is wrong for calling them all pedos, even though he was making a point, but there's no damage to him, you calling him racist. Now, of course, by the way, what should also matter here is the truth, and Laurence Fox is clearly not racist. He might make comments you don't like, but he's just married a mixed race woman, so that makes no sense. Here's how he announced the major news today.
Hello, I wanted to share some news with you, 5 years in the making. This morning, the Court of Appeal ruled in my favour that I did indeed suffer serious harm to my reputation following being called a racist by Nicola Thorpe, Simon Blake and Colin Seymour back in 2020. There's a fuller response in the replies to this video, but Lord Justice Warby said in his judgment, in my opinion, the only conclusion reasonably available to the judge was that the publication of each of the claimant's tweet did cause serious harm to Mr. Fox's reputation. This has been a long and sometimes very dark 5 years, but I believe, and I continue to believe from the bottom of my heart, that this is a fight worth fighting. We don't want to live in a country where conversations and careers are destroyed and shut down by that most appalling of slurs. And I hope now, in fact I know now, that people will think twice before making that horrible allegation again. I was cancelled entirely from the job I love and I still love and I hope to do again overnight. So I am so grateful for this outcome, and I hope it plays a part in putting free speech exactly back where it belongs, at the cornerstone of any free society. I am also very humbled by the support I've received from so many of you, so thank you. It's at times like these when you really do find out who your friends are and cherish them, really do. So I'd like to thank the judges in the Court of Appeal. I'd like to thank my wonderful legal team. I'd like to thank those who've supported me fully, and more than anything, I would like to thank my amazing wife who has stood by me through this and held my hand all the way through. Have a blessed day.
As I say, it is a technically interesting case because there is the potential for Nicola Thorpe and the other two leftists to have a retrial, but the understanding is that the costs would be so significant that probably it wouldn't make sense for them to go down that path. So it is a huge win for Laurence. He clarified further what it means for him, posting on X, "I'm delighted and grateful that the Court of Appeal has ruled in my favour on my appeal today, ruling that the trial judge was wrong to find that I had not suffered serious harm to my reputation as a result of Blake, Seymour and Thorpe's false slurs that I was a racist. Of course, those slurs damaged my reputation, and Lord Justice Warby, the most senior libel judge in England, agreed. He held that, in my opinion, the only conclusion reasonably available to the judge was that the publication of each of the claimant's tweets did cause serious harm to Mr. Fox's reputation generally. I look forward to the retrial and testing the defences of opinion and truth on the question whether I am a racist, as they all alleged, and I fully expect to be vindicated on those issues. I abhor racism and have always been colourblind, and the defendants will not be able to prove otherwise. In fact, my original tweet was about racial segregation, which I do not agree with at all, and I don't think that people should be defined by or divided by race. But this case was never about me. It was a battle for the freedom of speech in my beloved English language, and to stop the slur of racism being weaponised to gag those engaging in genuine debate that is important to society. I was very disappointed and upset when the original judge dismissed my claim that I'd suffered serious harm to my reputation by being called a racist, and this is now the second time I've had to go to the Court of Appeal Although it is hard, it does show that the British justice system works. You won't always agree with everything in every judgment, but the system does seem to work in the end. We should be proud of our country, which I love and has so much going for it. I'm really grateful to all 3 judges in the Court of Appeal for hearing my appeal with an open mind, for finding in my favour on serious harm, and for the obvious care taken in the detailed judgment given by Lord Justice Warby. I really hope that this judgment will make people think twice before unfairly slurring people they disagree with allegations of racism. Now, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, what is very interesting here, and I think it really matters, is that Laurence didn't start this fight. Okay, what happened is that he was responding to being called a racist, and so in kind responded to these 3 leftists, including Nicola Thorpe, saying, well, you're paedophiles. And he was making the point that if you're going to call me a racist, it's so absurd, I'm going to call you something which is really absurd too. He clearly was not suggesting that they actually were paedophiles. It was a maybe reckless thing to do from a legal point of view, but it was clearly something in context which in court was taken out of context. And of course, he lost. And part of this judgment is the appeal court saying, actually, this is insane. Like, these people were awarded, £180,000, like it's nuts. Personally, I wish this had stayed out of court altogether. I don't think anyone succeeds here apart from the lawyers. But I can understand why Laurence wasn't just going to roll over.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, Laurence should never have been put into a situation like this. Firstly, it was a great attack on rhetorical flourish, right? He was clearly speaking rhetorically when he referred to them as paedophiles, and that's part of the beauty, I would say, of debate. The wit, whether it's advisable or not, but rhetoric is a way in which you can highlight how ridiculous your opponent is being, and that's what he was trying to do here. And you would have to be several sandwiches short of a picnic not to have realized that he wasn't really calling them paedophiles. And you have to wonder about the judge in this case, the original judge in this case, because there are the 2 worst things to be called in the West today are 1, a racist, and 2, a paedophile. So with the racist slur having been put against, racist libel having put against Laurence, he responded in kind. More importantly, he used the exact phrasing that had been used against him. The journalist Thorpe, who had called him a racist, said anyone who employs him is doing so in the full knowledge that Laurence Fox is an outright racist or whatever. And he used the exact terminology and just replaced racist with paedophile. And what the judge was essentially saying in that original judgment was that it's either it's not a trouble to be called racist, or secondly, you actually really are a racist, so you can't be, So either of those is completely outrageous. And what we know, of course, is that that's given carte blanche now to people on the left and elsewhere to use that moniker of racist as a cudgel to silence debate, to silence anybody who dares to speak the truth, who dares to say the emperor has no clothes, who dares to reveal that diversity is our greatest weakness. It's now so easy for them to be silenced with the threat of being called a racist.
Rafe, really interesting exchange on Talk TV between Rupert Lowe of Restore Britain and Jeremy Kyle. Jeremy Kyle has made clear he's pretty much a